Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Indie Zone. My name is Kathy. We are continuing with our discussion of the transcript from the closed, sealed hearing that was conducted before Judge Stephen J. Hippler on January 23rd, 2025 in Idaho versus Koberger. We now continue with the direct examination of Matthew Gamette of the Idaho State Police by Ann Taylor. We are at page 84 of the transcript. Line 10. Ms. Taylor, Matthew Gamette is now called to the stand, ladies and gentlemen. The clerk, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give now before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Mr. Gamette, I do. Matthew Gamette, having been duly sworn, testifies as follows. Direct examination by Ms. Taylor. Question, good morning. Answer, good morning. Will you please state your name? Yes, my name is Matthew Gamette. And then we go on to page 85. He's asked to spell it, which he does. Line 2, how are you employed? Answer, I'm employed with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services, and I'm a laboratory system director. Question, what does that mean to be the laboratory system director? Answer, I oversee operations of the laboratory system. I oversee anything from purchasing, procurement, contracts, human resources type issues, and hiring, terminations. I also oversee things like just how the laboratory operates day to day. How long have you been held that position? Answer, I've been with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services for just about 16 years, and I believe I've held this current role for about 10. Question, do you have prior experience in a similar line of work? Answer, I do. Prior to working for Idaho State Police, I worked for Washington State Patrol as a DNA analysis and also a crime scene responder. Question, how were you educated? Answer, I have a bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University. I also have a master's degree from Brigham Young University. And then I have continuing, and we go into page 86, certificates from both West Virginia University and UC Davis. Line 3, are you involved in the collaborative group NIVIC? Answer, I am. Question, what is that group? Answer, so that is the National Technology Implementation Collaborative. So currently my role there is to chair the group. Question, as it relates to forensic investigation, genetic genealogy, what's the group role with that field? Answer, so currently what we're working on, we have several different subcommittees in our forensic investigative genetic genealogy group. What that group is focused on is anything from policies, procedures, contracts, things of that nature, looking at the implementation of that technology into public forensics scientists' laboratories. Question, why is that important? Answer, why is the work of the group important? Question, let me ask the question better. Why is it important to have policies and procedures? Answer, bottom of page 86, line 25 going into 87, line 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the direct examination of Matthew Gamette of ISP by Ann C. Taylor. Answer, in any public forensic science laboratory, we want to make sure we implement technology well, that we implement it in a robust way, that it can be relied upon for things such as courts. And so we always want to make sure that we're implementing a technology, that we take a look at how that technology is being used and that we apply it well in the public laboratory space. Is that important, question, for public trust? Answer, I believe so, yes. Are there other organizations that you're involved in the course of your work? Yes, I'm involved with several other forensic science organizations. Question, how about ASCLD? Answer, yes. Question, what is that one? Answer, ASCLD, the American Society of Crime Lab Directors. Question, what is the purpose of that group? Answer, so that's the group of laboratory directors. It could be laboratory managers, quality managers, laboratory leaders, in essence, are members of that organization. Question, what is your role with that group? Answer, currently I report to the board. Bottom of page 87 into 88, of directors as the CFSO, the Consortium of Forensic Science Organizations liaison for the organization for ASCLD. Question: did you have a role in deciding that Othram Labs should contract with Idaho State Police Forensic Labs? Answer: I did have a role, yes. Question: what was your role? Answer: my role would be as the laboratory system director making a decision on contracts that would be awarded. Question: did you decide that Othram should receive the contract? Answer: I did not. Question: did you work on the contract with Othram? Answer: I need to answer that question a little bit different way than you stated if you'll give me some leeway. Question: sure. Answer: I did not work specifically on the contract with Othram. However, I worked on the specifications that led to a contract being awarded to Othram. Line 25, question: the specifications you worked on did, and we're going into 89, those end up becoming part of the contract with Othram? Answer: yes. Question: what were those specifications? Answer: so there were a lot of specifications within the scope of work that we developed to send out for a general bid process. As we bid, as a state agency, as we bid for a contract, we send out specifications that anyone has to comply with as they give us their documents and responses back on those things. Then we have the ability to look at and make sure that they are compliant with those specifications that we have sent out. Question: what were the specifications for Othram? Answer: there were a lot of specifications sent out on the request for proposals intent to bid. There were a lot of different specifications that were sent out. Again, I have a recollection of some of them. I don't have full memory of all of them. Question: will you share with us what you do recall? Answer: so things in that contract would specify that they use the interim policy. We also would put things in there about them. Following, bottom of page 89 into 90, environmental protection type provisions the federal government requires us to bid by. It also would have other things like reporting requirements back to us, billing procedures, a lot of different conditions. We put in that to specify how they are going to work with us. Question: when you say interim policy, are you referring to the Department of Justice interim policy? Answer: yes. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the direct examination of Mr. Matthew Gamette of Idaho State Police, and we are listening to and reading from Ms. Taylor's direct examination of Mr. Gamette. Question: did you care if they were an accredited lab? Answer: so at this time, as we were looking for a forensic investigative genetic genealogy vendor or company to provide those services for us, we were not aware of any companies at that time that were accredited. Question: since that time, though, are you aware that companies do become accredited? Answer: absolutely. Currently, there are definitely companies that are accredited in these services. At the time that this contract was bid, there were none to my knowledge. Question: did you look at the procedures and protocols of Othram before you decided? Answer: I don't recall. So I don't recall specifically myself. Bottom of page 90 into 91, reviewing those criteria. I know that there were manuals, protocols that were provided back to us as part of that bid. Generally, I would provide those to others within our laboratory that were more qualified than I was looking at the specific technology. And I am not qualified in FIGG analysis. Question: do you recall if their instruments were validated? Answer: I do not recall. Question: would that be important to have their instruments validated? Validation is up to each laboratory and how they accomplish that. I can't speak to the working practices of Othram Laboratories. Line 15. Question: does Idaho State Police Forensics Lab validate their equipment? Answer: yes, we do. Is that important to do that? Answer: to us as an accredited laboratory, yes. That is an important part. Question: how about retention of data or the ability to go back and rebuild the work or look at work that was done? Answer: so we retain, in our cases, we retain our electronic data. We retain any other notes and, line 91, things that we make as part of our case records, part of our case file. We provide those to the investigators and to the court as a normal business practice. Question: did Othram do that? Answer. In this case, I believe they gave us a report or what was identified as a preliminary report. The contract specifies that they would keep any data or other things associated with that. For our purposes, we were most concerned that this data or anything else not be released to any other parties. And so our concern was more about data security, data privacy. And so in this case, I don't know if they have other data or other records that they have kept. They have retained. We had asked them as part of the termination in this case of our work that they would preserve those things or what they would communicate with both the prosecutor's office and with Moscow Police Department if any of that information was to be disposed of or whatnot. Question. Okay, keep it or tell somebody before you get rid of it. Am I understanding that? Answer. Our specification was that it stopped our process with them, that we were no longer in a contractual obligation with them on this case. Bottom of page 92, top of 93, essentially, we were transferring ownership of anything on this case between them and Moscow Police Department and the prosecutor's office. Answer. The question that you ended up receiving from them, are you aware that this report doesn't provide details of how they did their work? Answer. I have seen the report. Yes, I have seen what was in the report. Question. Would you agree that that's what's in the report is far different from what the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab produces by way of notes and photographs in connection with its work? Answer. We were not provided with analytical notes. We were not provided with data to my knowledge. We were provided with what was identified to me as a preliminary report, which contained some of their genealogical work on the case and other things, such as potential nationalities. Mr. Gamette is referring to the preliminary report here, ladies and gentlemen, that was provided by Othram in this case. We are nearing the bottom of page 93 of the transcript with Ms. Taylor's continued direct examination. Question. Is that different than what you produce when you produce a report at your lab? Answer. It's hard for me to answer that question because it's a different report. It's a different type of analysis. And so I can't make a qualification there. I can tell you in our DNA reports, we release the report. We release the analyst notes as a general practice. We have the electronic data and other things available for disclosure. But that's our general practice. I can't speak to the process as Othram Labs and what they disclose, nor can I speak to what is normal for a release in an FIGG case. Question. Are you familiar with how you come up with an SMP, with that process, where you get from a DNA sample to an SMP? Answer. In general, yes, but I'm not qualified in FIGG analysis. Question. Okay, I won't go too far with that. Are you familiar with how you get from a DNA sample to an STR sample for the lab's purposes? Answer, yes. Question. Are there similarities between the two processes from getting pieces of DNA to an end result profile that you can use? Line 19, ladies and gentlemen, this is page 94. The answer is similarities in process as far as extraction and quantitation of DNA, but as far as instrumentation used, methods, and those kinds of things, very different processes. Page 94, we continue with a question from Ms. Taylor, line 23. Do some of the documents that Idaho State Police Forensic Labs produces that shows us those results, those would be similar to what you would expect to see with an SMP. This is line 1, ladies and gentlemen. Now page 95. Line 2 is the answer. I would assume. Again, I'm not qualified in FIGG analysis, so I can't speak to what documents they may or may not produce. Question. Let's move from there. Thank you for that. And let's talk about Othram being involved in the case that winds up being why we're here today. What communication did you have with Othram on the early end of the process? Answer. To my recollection, our early communication on this case was providing them with DNA that they would be able to develop, hopefully, an investigative lead for us on a case. After that sample, to my knowledge, had been that we had followed our processes through and that we put a sample into CODIS, that we had not received any hits off CODIS, and then we would proceed with the next step of testing. We did have a contractual relationship with them early on, I believe 2021. So we did have a contract with them in place. Line 22, question. Was this the first case that Othram worked pursuant to that contract? Answer. No, I don't believe so. Question. How did they get the DNA? This is the bottom of 95 going into page 96, line 1. Answer. The DNA sample itself, that DNA sample was delivered by Moscow Police Department in person to them at Othram Labs. So we're learning here for the first time that the DNA sample that Othram Labs worked on was not sent via mail, was not sent via courier. It was, according to Mr. Gamette's testimony here, the DNA sample was delivered by Moscow Police Department in person to them at Othram Labs. Question. Did you have any role in that part? Answer, I did. Question, what did you do? Answer, I accompanied the officer from Boise down to Houston and down to Othram Laboratory. I didn't have possession of the sample, but I was with the investigator that did that. So this has to do with chain of custody, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, that I give here pursuant to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Line 11, question. After that sample was delivered, did you have communications with Othram further? Answer, yes. Question, what were those? Answer, so I had communications to my memory with them about what type of analysis we were asking them to do. Also, what type of searching. I remember they asked specifically for consent to do certain types of searching. We had to authorize things through memos and whatnot of them doing certain searching. Specifically, I believe it was family tree DNA that they needed an authorization for. I remember having significant discussion with them about YSTR testing and if or how that would be accomplished. Line 25, question, going into the next page. We're at the bottom of page 96. Question, why did you want Othram to do YSTR testing? This is line 1, now page 97. Answer, so the reason for YSTR testing is to utilize different investigative databases that might be out there. I don't believe in this case we ever did YSTR testing. A lot of the discussion was around preservation of the sample, or as much of the sample we could preserve, and so our recommendation to them, ladies and gentlemen, was not to proceed with that type of testing at this time, to kind of see where we were able to go with the traditional SMT testing and the whole genome sequencing. And then we would maybe potentially revisit YSTR testing. Line 13, he continues, I do remember some discussion with David Middleman at Othram about if they were able to bootstrap some of the whole genome sequencing in order to develop a Y profile that could be searchable from the data that they had already developed outside of using additional sample to specifically develop a YSTR profile or any kind of a Y profile. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time that any name associated with Othram Lab has been disclosed to the public. David Middleman at Othram. This is on line 14 of this testimony. Continuing on, and we're on page 97, line 20, the questioning by Ms. Taylor. What does that mean? Bootstrapping. Take me back. They have this DNA sample. And then have they done those steps to get to their SNP before you want bootstrapping done? Or at what steps are you talking about? Line 25. Essentially, it was our Understanding, and we're on page 97 going into 98. Again, answer. Essentially, it was our understanding that they were in the process or had already obtained a whole genome sequencing profile. And so our question to them was, is there a way to develop a YSTR profile from the genetic information that you already have through the other method of testing? Question. And that's what you mean by bootstrap. Add a different kind of analysis. Answer correct. Question, why would you want to do that? Answer again, to see if there was a potential to search Y databases that might be available out there to identify genetic lineages. Question, what does that mean, genetic lineages? Answer, so a Y chromosome is passed down from father to son, and so we would be looking to see if we can identify a family line through tracking the Y chromosome DNA from father to son, to grandfather, all the way down to grandson, and potentially over multiple generations. So it would tie us into a family line that could be investigated further. Line 22, question by Ms. Taylor. Did Othram bootstrap and get the YSTR for you? Answer. To my knowledge, they never did anything with YSTR testing. And to my recollection, we're at the bottom of page 98 to the top of page 99 with my discussions with David. That wasn't possible with the data that he had at the point. Question. It was impossible? Answer. That it was not possible. Correct. Question. Thank you. Answer. I do not believe that was attempted. Again, I'm not familiar with the technology that he would have had to have used to do such a thing. So I'm not aware if that was possible. If the technology didn't exist, I just don't know. Question. Okay. At some point, did Othram talk to you about the work that they were doing? Answer. Yes. Question. Did they have a recommendation? Answer. They did. They had at least one recommendation that I can remember. Question. When was that conversation? Answer. I don't remember exactly when that conversation happened. Question. Well, let's put it between. Well, when did they get the DNA to start with? Answer. So they got the DNA November 22nd, I believe. Question. And when were they notified to stop work? Question. When were they notified to stop work? We are at the bottom of page 99. Now going into 100 with the answer. Line 1. Answer. I believe the official notification was on December 10th, if I remember correctly. Question. So when they came back to you with some recommendations, where was that in relation to the stop work? Line 7. Answer. Probably early in December. I'm guessing the actual work, the laboratory, what I would call the wet work in the laboratory, would be the first couple of weeks, possibly before they would have turned it over to a genealogist to be searching in the databases and then those sorts of things. Question, to make sure I'm with you, a quote, wet work, end of quote, means DNA sample to where we get to the whole genome sequencing and where we get to an SMP. I know I'm skipping steps, but that's the wet work. Line 17, ladies and gentlemen, comes the answer correct. The laboratory work. So anything that would be done in the physical laboratory, handling the sample, putting it into tubes, adding liquids, things of that nature, that would be done in the laboratory. Sequencing on an instrument, that would all be done in the first week, several weeks. Question. So after that, they had a recommendation for you. This is the bottom of page 100 going into 101 for the answer. Line 1, answer. Correct. Question. What's their recommendation to you? Answer. Their recommendation, to my memory, to my recall, was that they had several individuals that had the potential to be of interest in this investigation. They asked us if, to further their family tree building, if we could be in contact with individuals and see if they were willing to contribute information into the database that they were using in order to further the family tree building and further the geological work. Question. And we're in a closed setting here, so I'm going to ask you to give me the last name. Answer. I don't recall the last name. I'm sorry. Question. Was it your understanding that these were 4 brothers? Line 18. Answer. Yes. Question. Okay. What did you do in relationship to these 4 brothers? Answer. So we did some cursory work, just looking in publicly accessible information, literally Google searches and things of that nature. What our approach was is we didn't want to be approaching people, especially with, and bottom of 101 into 102, investigation of this nature. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop with this testimony here, Mr. Gamette, ISP. We have learned some fascinating information. We're learning about the wet work that was done regarding the DNA. We're learning that he actually transported the DNA from Idaho to Texas with an unnamed member so far of the Moscow Police Department. That is going to be, I believe, a big issue. I'm giving my opinion here under the First Amendment regarding chain of custody. How was that sample taken from Idaho physically by the Moscow Police Department unnamed officer, along with Mr. Gamette of ISP, to Othram Labs? We will continue on with the conclusion of this witness testimony in our next episode of the Indie Zone podcast. In the interim, to read this transcript, please go to the link that I have provided in the description to this podcast episode. Go down to the 21st of February 2025. That is the date that this transcript was released to the public. This will now conclude this episode of the Indie Zone. This is Kathy. Thank you for joining us here today.